Classic Conversations is brought to you by Palm Springs Life magazine, celebrating 50 years of bringing art and culture to Southern California.
The Michael H. Lord Gallery in Palm Springs is proud to support public television. Learn more about our paintings, photography, and sculpture at michaelhlordgallery.com or our North Palm Canyon location. Michael H. Lord Gallery, an oasis of contemporary art since 1978.
The Camelot Theaters, bringing you retrospective documentary and art films, foreign and award-winning motion pictures. And the following: Dr. Betty Baxter, certified life coach and consultant. Cash Baxter. The Betty M. Barker Trust. SERP and John Conte Foundation. The Stephen Philibosian Foundation, supporting the arts and the Virginia Waring International Piano Competition. Dorothy and Harold Meyerman, supporting the arts and the Palm Springs Art Museum. The Coachella Valley History Museum, sharing the unique history of the desert and its pioneers. The Dr. Carrion Foundation, providing scholarships for Coachella Valley Mexican-American students. Hi, everybody. It is such a pleasure to have as my guest William J. Mann. He has written the most wonderful biographies. I think he's the best when it comes to biographies. His newest is Hello, Gorgeous, Becoming Barbra Streisand. And you know, I'm going to read some quotes about his books. When he wrote Kate, the Woman Who Was Hepburn, the New York Observer wrote, "Not just the best of Hepburn, it's a book that sets new standards in movie biographies." And when he wrote How to Be a Movie Star, Elizabeth Taylor in Hollywood, USA Today raved, "Mann pulls back the curtain on another glamorous big legend." And of course, I love the quote, another quote which said, "Reading this life is like gorging on a chocolate sundae." So he's done it again with Hello, Gorgeous. And USA Today raves about that book as well. Mann's meticulous research and insightful analysis go deeper than any previous biography. Okay, William, you know, we did talk to you before about the Elizabeth Taylor book.
Indeed we did, yes.
And I do want to say that, again, the raves continue. I think USA Today said, Mann's meticulous research and insightful analysis go deeper than any previous biography. And obviously you did a tremendous amount of research with this book, Hello, Gorgeous, Becoming Barbra Streisand. I understand you did not originally want to do this book.
That is right, and it was my editor, not myself, who was the big Barbra Streisand fan. He's the one that suggested doing Barbra Streisand. It's not that I disliked her. I mean, I admired her. I thought she had a beautiful voice. I'd seen a few of the movies, but I didn't get the massive appeal that some people have for her. So I said, let me do a little digging. Let me see if I can find something interesting to say about her that's never been said before. And if I can, then I'll do the book. Well, I found there were a few things I could say.
Obviously, and the interesting thing is that it covers like the first 5 years of her career. It doesn't go beyond that. But getting there, which is an extraordinary story.
It really is, and I think sometimes when we see these narratives in people's lives, really sometimes a short excerpt of that life can tell us so much about the entire life. And really those first 5 formative years of Streisand's life informs everything else. And I start with when she's 17. She shows up in Manhattan from Brooklyn, 17, no connection, no monies. And she is, by the end of the book, she's the biggest star on Broadway and the top-selling recording artist in the country.
And the wonderful thing about the way you write is little things that you drop in. And I'm going to go to something that's right in the beginning, and I'm curious how you found that out.
Okay.
And that is when she was an usherette as a teenager, and she really wanted to hide her face because when she was famous, she didn't want anyone to recognize her.
That's
Not
right.
if, but when.
That's right.
Now, where did that story, how did you find that out?
One of the great things about researching this book was that I got to meet so many people who knew Barbra in those early years. And these are people who didn't go on to then become famous themselves. So sometimes when you interview people who are in the business, as they say, they're afraid to say something that might be a little bit controversial because they might have to work with Barbra next month. So, or whoever the subject is. And in this case, these were people who said, I can share these memories with you because, it was a time and I've got another life. And they were so candid and so forthcoming. And little stories like that really give us a sense of who this young woman was and her ambition. And as you point out, her supreme confidence.
Right. I mean, she was going to be great.
She was going to be great.
Settle for nothing else.
Absolutely.
Which you just bring out over and over.
Right. Straight to the top or nowhere at all.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay. Now let me ask you: when you do this, and when you talk to people, as in this case in the early years, people who played a very important part in molding what became Barbra Streisand.
That's right.
How do you protect yourself to know that it's not sour grapes because they're no longer in her life?
You're right. There's absolutely that. And as a journalist, you have to be aware, okay, what is the motivation behind this source? And you have to weigh everything, you know. And I got to know most of the people that I used as sources in this book. I really spent a lot of time with them. And so there is a trust that's developed. And you begin to realize, okay, this person is really telling me the way he saw it, the way she experienced it. And then you have to weigh it against everything else. Sometimes it's interesting because one person will tell me a story and another one will tell me pretty much the same story, but there are differences and you have to find a way to balance those out.
Yeah. Now, you have never met Barbra?
Oh no, Barbra has said that she will never talk to biographers. She will never give interviews about her life in this way. And that she'll never like any book that's written about her, including the one that she will write herself. She won't even like that one. So she's not the type to sit down and give me an interview for this. But everyone else around her from those years did.
Yeah, well, you mentioned like Marty Ehrlichman, who is still.
Marty Ehrlichman is still with her. Absolutely,
and he was a manager.
Absolutely, her manager, one of her second manager, but he goes back to 1962.
Right.
So he's been around and really one of the guiding principles of her career.
And still is, apparently, or not?
Absolutely, still is. Still
and he
is.
likes the book. Correct?
I'm hoping.
Oh, you haven't heard?
I haven't heard for sure, but I'm hoping. Yes.
Yeah. Well, another thing. How long did it take you to do this research?
It was about 3 years from start to finish, and I pretty much started right after Elizabeth Taylor, after I got the book. Elizabeth Taylor finished, and I started in on this, and that's about the process, between the writing and the research, and it's about a 3-year period.
Yeah. The press agents in those days could control really what was said about their clients. And today it's all tabloid journalism. It's totally different. I don't think that you could possibly do a campaign for someone in the way that it was done then.
You're right. You're absolutely right about that, because in the 60s, the newspaper columnists like Walter Winchell and Dorothy Kilgallen, even Hedda Hopper and Luella Parsons were still around. That's how the word got out about stars. About when you wanted to manufacture a new star, introduce them to the public, you worked through the columnists. Today, there's TMZ and Gawker and all this stuff online and reality shows, and so it's much more difficult to control the message. But in Barbra's case, she had a shrewd team of publicists and handlers who created this phenomenon and really, in many ways, brought her talent to the world in a way that I don't think has often been documented in other books about her.
No, and that's what makes your book so wonderful and so different, because it is the early days, and as you call it, becoming Barbra. And I love in the beginning you spell it the way Barbra's usually spelled, because that's the way she spelled it. Right. Until she decided to change it.
Exactly.
Everything was for attention.
Indeed. There's no question that she is one of the truly great talents of the 20th century. No question. I'm not taking anything away from the talent.
Oh, no. And you say that over and over again.
Absolutely.
Gorgeous the voice was.
Right.
Yeah.
But at the same time, there are many talented people who don't get brought to the public attention, who sing, forever in some back room somewhere and never really get to the heights that Barbra did. And the reason that she got up there was because of this really canny publicity campaign that launched her, and with an eye ultimately for landing that role in Funny Girl.
Yeah, and again, she was so young. To think that someone of that age, who started out not knowing a soul, was able to get this all put together, and how she does it is amazing. I would think that people who were I don't know, because you can't do it the same way. I remember with Elizabeth Taylor, we talked about it, and I said, I wonder if somebody reading the book would say, okay, this is how you remain a movie star.
Right.
But this is so different. And Streisand is so different.
Absolutely, and Elizabeth Taylor, of course, came out of the old studio system, so there was a machinery in place to create her. When Barbra came along, that wasn't there anymore, and of course she was singing in nightclubs, so it was more difficult, and the world was suddenly changing so much in the early 60s. I go into that a lot about, this emergence of new kinds of stars and new faces and new sounds, and Barbra fit that that move, that trend in society.
Interesting also the way you tie in, which is again research, what was happening in the world when she records at Columbia.
Right.
And I don't think this gives it away. It was the Cuban Missile Crisis,
Right,
but
right.
she was not aware of who.
Right, no
she
one was, right, yeah, right, yeah.
And obviously that's all research. You looked up the date. Well, what's happening on that day?
Yeah, I thank you for noticing that, because I'm
Yeah.
very, very much, I consider myself a historian even before a biographer. And I think we can't understand people's lives without understanding the times in which they lived, because where we live and how we live and the times in which we live, inform the choices we make and the options that we have. So I think in Barbara's case, I needed to give that context, especially since the time and place, New York in the 1960s, is such an important part of the book.
Yeah, it certainly is. Amazing. In the columns, I mean, did you just spend hours in libraries looking up columns? Because you quote columns.
I do, yes.
And what the columnists, whether it was Earl Wilson or
Wilson, yes, right, yeah,
who was a great New York
Right, he was
columnist.
another one, yeah.
And what they said about her, and I think you have a quote that's her quote. I think it was in a column about the bump in the nose.
Yes, oh yes, right, exactly.
Can you share that? That isn't going to give away your book, do you think?
No, I think that's great. I mean, in fact, Barbara's often talked about, her nose being such a signature part of her appearance, and people think about that. And
But the line that I mean was there was a bump, that the bump on the nose, there are other bumps.
oh, there are other bumps that a girl has too, and she pointed that out exactly,
Yeah, right.
and because she had a great figure, people forget that, she was super sexy, and we sometimes forget that.
And you bring that out very often.
Right, sure, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah, and then again, I had no idea that she had studied drama and the theater.
Right.
I mean, I just thought here was a singer who turned
Right.
into a great actress.
No,
not at all.
She wanted to be an actress. That in the beginning, that's what I really want people to understand, is when she first came to Manhattan, it was about to be a great actress.
Yeah.
I mean, she's talking Shakespeare, she was talking
Right.
Shaw, she wanted to play Medea. And when friends said to her, "You've got this great voice, you need to sing," she said, "Oh, but I don't want to be a singer, I want to be an actress." And that's, that was a driving force for her those early years.
Yeah. Did you spend hours at libraries?
I did, but what's so great today, and in comparison to when I first started writing books, is the internet gives us options now. So many newspapers have been digitized. So that means I can search hundreds, if not thousands of newspapers for a one-word phrase, and I can search everything. So suddenly I've got the whole run of Earl Wilson's columns at my disposal at my computer at home. So it's really remarkable how technology has assisted researching books like this.
When you describe her first appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show.
Right.
So how did you get that? I mean, obviously bystander who was there.
Right, I did talk to people who were in the audiences for many of those shows, but I also, what's so great is most of Barbara's early television appearances are on videotape. And if they are not on YouTube already, I got access to a DVD. It was a bootleg DVD, and so I can't reveal how I got it, but it was a fascinating DVD, because it really gave me every time from the time her first appearance on the Jack Parr Show, right up through the late 1960s.
But what about the conversation before she was on the air?
Where Ed Sullivan,
yeah,
where he talks about he can't say her name, right?
That's right.
Yes,
Yeah.
that came from friends, that came from people who were around. Ed Sullivan kept calling her Barbara Streisand, and it drove her crazy that when people couldn't say her name, it was like fingernails on a blackboard for her. She said, "I say my name correct," and she stood behind the curtain saying Streisand, Streisand, and you can see it on the tape that Ed Sullivan hears her saying that, and he laughs and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, Barbara Streisand," and he says it correctly.
Right. What about obviously her lovers? You talked to them? Did you talk to Elliott Gould?
I didn't talk to Elliott.
You didn't?
No,
because
I think
one gets the impression.
But what was so great was Elliott, especially in the early 1970s, was very forthcoming with the press. He was one of those stars who just really talked all about himself, and it was very, very revealing interviews. So I've got so much material there. I also talked to several really close friends of his.
She was determined as an artist, but she did have bumps in the road as a lover.
Absolutely, yeah, and I try to understand that part of her too, because obviously her professional goals were her primary focus. She really wanted to be a star, but she was also a young woman. And she fell head over heels in love at 18 years old and thought she was going to marry this guy. This was Barry Dennen. And Barry was so influential in helping shape her career, her sound, her stage presence. And she thought we were going to get married. She was so happy to be with him. And when the relationship ended, very tragically in her view, it was devastating for her. She was so young.
But she should have known.
I think so. I think so.
There is a background to this, so it's in the book.
Right,
There is a background to this which
Right.
she should have been aware of. But again, her belief in herself, she could change that.
She could change things, and
Right.
and at 18, the world. She was innocent. She was so innocent. She had never really been in love before, and so that writing those chapters were very poignant for me.
Obviously, did talk to him.
Barry was a huge
at great length.
Yes.
Now I understand he wrote a book.
He did. Barry Dennen wrote a book about just about their brief 1-year
Did she
love
ever
affair.
hear from him, or that she was going to sue him, or any of that kind
Well,
of thing?
Barry owns tapes of Barbara from their early recording sessions, and there was an attempt for her to get those tapes, and he wouldn't sell them to her or give them to her. So there was a little conflict over that. So,
But not over the book? It never got mentioned?
no, she really doesn't say much about that part. But I know they've been in touch over the years. But when we think back to our first love, it's always it's hard, and especially when suddenly it's brought up in the public, it must be strange.
Right. Okay, back to Elliott Gould.
Yes, right.
Okay. Now, so he was very open in interviews, and
Yes.
that included his relationship early with Barbara?
Absolutely was, and he was very candid. And I also spoke with some very, very close friends of Elliott who gave me some real good insights into what was going on between the two of them. And I think in many ways Barbara, after having her heart broken by Barry Dennen, when Elliott came along, and he was the other way around. He fell head over heels for Barbara, and that was wonderful for her. It was so affirming. Suddenly here's a guy who really, really likes me. And she was just, it was for a couple of years there, it was a really sweet love affair.
Yeah. And of course they did get married.
And they did get married.
I haven't gotten to the marriage yet.
Right, it does happen. And
They're
it does
going
happen.
together.
Right,
Yeah.
yes. And then they have a son later on.
Right, that's correct.
Yeah.
Are they still friendly at all? Do you know?
I think they're friendly, though. Elliott has made some comments in the past, kind of can't understand the kind of level of fame that Barbara lives in, and he says, why would anybody ever kind of create themselves into this kind of be larger than life? And though he certainly had a successful career as well.
Yeah, but nothing like Barbara.
No, and very few people have.
That's right.
Yeah.
That is correct.
Right.
Do you think she's ever happy?
It's hard to say now. I don't know her obviously, and
Yeah.
I didn't study the current life, but she appears to be. She seems to be mellower. She seems to have found a lasting relationship with James Brolin that seems to be working. And you listen to her in interviews, she seems a little less driven. I hope she is. I hope she's found some peace.
Right,
Yeah.
right. What are you working on now?
Well, I'm going to do a departure right now for my next book. I think I've done 3 great ladies. I think I need to do something a little different. So I'm going to be looking at Hollywood in the 1920s and what it was like. And if you know the book Midnight in the Garden of Good and Evil, well, it's going to be similar to that, but set in the 1920s and in Hollywood. So that'll give you a little idea.
That'll be great fun.
I hope so, because I'm excited about it.
I'm doing research for a story that's in the January issue of Palm Springs Life.
Yes.
And it's the background of Palm Springs and the celebrities who made it. And I decided nobody really knows about the 20s and
Right.
what the people who came down here,
Right.
Rudolph Valentino, people
Yes.
like that.
Yeah, sure.
And it's such fun, and you will do such a great job.
I'm glad you're doing that, because that was such a transformative time, and it hasn't really gotten the kind of study that the 30s and the 40s have gotten. And women had just gotten the right to vote, and the war was over, and there was this kind of change in society, and it's a really fascinating time.
Yeah, right. Yeah. And how long will you do research on that? When will we see that?
Well, I've been doing research on this one for a long time, actually. This is a book that's been pretty close to my heart for a while. So I've been doing research whenever I could. So we're hoping this book will be out in 2014.
Great. Okay, now back to Streisand.
Yes, right.
Yeah. All right. Funny Girl.
Yes.
There's so much about the making of the show,
Right.
actually, which I found as fascinating as everything you have about Barbara.
Right.
Was the making of the show, and Jerome Robbins, and the argument between Stark and Robbins.
Right, right.
And the myth, you say it's a myth that Ray Stark never wanted Barbara when he did.
Right.
So where did you get all that? Now, Jerry Robbins, you got certain papers of his.
Yes, what was so great for me in doing this was that, I found that there was this huge, when I'm talking, this is an enormous collection of papers that Jerome Robbins left to the New York Public Library. And it's so revealing. I was able to completely rewrite the narrative of how Funny Girl got on the stage, because it traditionally has been that Ray Stark opposed Barbara and he didn't want her, and that there was that Jerry Robbins was kind of the director, but then he was out, and we never understood why he left, and none of that's true. And in fact, Ray Stark was a huge supporter of Barbara right from the start, and getting in so close, reading Jerome Robbins' papers, and also I got Bob Fosse's papers. He was briefly a director of Funny Girl as well. And that allowed me to get right in there, so right behind the stage, and see them rehearsing and see his notes to Barbara and things like that. So that part of the book, I think, is very, very revolutionary, if I can use a word like that, because it changes the whole understanding of Barbara's early career.
Right. It absolutely fascinating. Do you think that you will do a sequel? I know people ask you, and you leave it at such an early age.
I could. I certainly, originally we were going to take this book up to 1968, so I do have quite a bit of new material that I didn't use. So I could. I don't know. We'll see. The sales have been really great so far. If they warrant it, maybe I will.
Okay. Why did you choose the title, Hello, Gorgeous?
Well, it seemed to me, of course, that's the line that Barbara says as she walks across the stage in Funny Girl and looks in the mirror and says, well, hello, gorgeous.
Yeah.
And I seemed to me that was something that metaphorically announces her arrival on the scene, because of course she changes the very definition of what beauty was and talent and success. So hello, gorgeous. In 1962 she was being called not very pretty, and how could a girl like that succeed? By the end of the 60s she was the epitome of glamour, so she was pretty gorgeous.
Yeah. And there's so much in here too about her choice of wardrobe. And I am remembering that when she, if I'm not mistaken, you don't get there, of course, but in the book, but
right.
When she won the Academy Award, I think she wore see-through shorts.
She did indeed, yes. Well, what's so telling about that is that she was the beginning of the 60s when my book starts. She's seen as this kind of eccentric, kooky thrift shop girl. By the end of the 60s, she was a fashion setter. Trendsetter. So it was really amazing, that transformation.
Yeah, but it was kind of a weird outfit.
Yes, but it was done by Arnold.
But now that I've read the book,
right.
I realize, well, of course she wore that because she wanted everybody to talk about it.
Right, exactly.
She didn't care what they said,
and
just so they talked about it.
It was the designer outfit by Arnold Scassi. So it was meant to make a statement.
But just great. Okay, well, you have. Are you doing all the talk shows? Or?
I am. I'm off on my tour, and I've been talking to people and doing interviews and book readings and all that. It's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm sure it is.
Yeah.
And you will go back and do your 20s research.
Yes, then I go back to finish that book, exactly.
Yeah,
I'm also working on my book on Katharine Hepburn's been optioned as a film.
Oh!
And so we're working on the script, and my book on Wisecracker has been optioned as both a stage musical and as a film.
Now, Wisecracker was...
The Life of William Haynes.
Ah,
yes.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Great designer.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Oh, that I didn't realize that. That's wonderful. Thank you for
so we've
sharing
got a lot
that
of
with
projects.
our viewers.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Well, I just want to thank you. We've spoken to you before.
Yes,
and
it was wonderful to be here again.
Double pleasure to have you again.
Thank you for having me.
And I do hope that I'll look forward to your book in 1914.
Yes.
You're going to have it ready by then.
Yes, by 14.
Okay, do you have set times that you write? Do you say, okay, I have to do this at this time?
I
do
tend
that?
I tend to write in the morning, and if I have a deadline, I'm much better if I don't have a deadline. You're probably the same way. If you got a deadline, I got to finish this by a certain
So
point.
did you work around the clock sometimes?
I
Stay
do.
Until 3, 4 in the morning?
If I have to, or I get up even earlier.
Okay, now you've got all the research and you've got notes. Of course, you've got the computer to go by.
Right.
But then you find that you have papers all over the place
I
around
do.
you.
I'm pretty well organized, but yeah, you wouldn't want to see my office in the height of writing the book because there's stuff everywhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not alone.
Right,
So
exactly.
glad to
I think
hear
most
that.
writers are like
Right,
that. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, I want to thank you so very much.
Thank you, Gloria. It's been great to be here.
I really enjoyed finding out more about Hello, Gorgeous, becoming Barbra Streisand. And I will look forward to seeing your next book on the 20s.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. And don't forget, you can follow me on my website, www.gloriagreer.com. And also, if you go to Facebook, but facebook.com Gloria Greer PS. And occasionally I tweet under SmallScribe. We'll see you. Classic Conversations is brought to you by Palm Springs Life magazine, celebrating 50 years of bringing art and culture to Southern California.
The Michael H. Lord Gallery in Palm Springs is proud to support public television. Learn more about our paintings, photography, and sculpture at michaelhlordgallery.com or at our North Palm Canyon location. Michael H. Lord Gallery, an oasis of contemporary art since 1978.
The Camelot Theaters, bringing you retrospective documentary and art films, foreign and award-winning motion pictures. And the following: Dr. Betty Baxter, certified life coach and consultant. Cash Baxter. The Betty M. Barker Trust. SERP and John Conte Foundation. The Stephen Philibosian Foundation, supporting the arts and the Virginia Waring International Piano Competition. Dorothy and Harold Meyerman, supporting the arts and the Palm Springs Art Museum. The Coachella Valley History Museum, sharing the unique history of the desert and its pioneers. The Dr. Carrion Foundation, providing scholarships for Coachella Valley Mexican-American students.